Have you ever wondered why some women walk into a room and the very air bends around them? Not because they beg for attention, not because they sparkle with practiced charm, but because they radiate something raw, something unshakable, presence. This is the power of a woman who no longer whispers her worth, she embodies it. Carl Jung once warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." For too long, women have mistaken their fate for weakness, for silence, for pleasing others at the cost of their soul. They are taught to smile while aching, to soften their voice so others feel stronger, to erase themselves to keep love alive. That is how worth becomes a whisper, hidden, uncertain, trembling. But every whisper eventually demands to rise. Suppression breeds rebellion in the body, anxiety, sleepless nights, the quiet despair of feeling unseen. And then one day, the soul cracks. A fire erupts. She realizes her value cannot be placed in the fragile hands of those who never truly saw her. It was hers all along. Imagine her before the mirror, no longer hunting for flaws, no longer practicing smiles to earn approval. She looks into her own eyes, as if staring into the abyss of centuries of silenced women, and finally sees the truth, her shadow. Jung called it the treasure chest buried in the dark. Inside it lives the rage she was told to suppress, the desire she was told to hide, the grief she was told to swallow. And when she dares to touch it, she finds not shame, but power. This is shadow work, confronting every piece of herself she was taught to reject. It is terrifying, it is raw, it strips illusions from her skin until she stands naked in truth. The illusions die, the illusion that endless giving will make her chosen, the illusion that silence will keep her safe, the illusion that pleasing will shield her from abandonment. They burn to ash. And from the ashes rises a woman who no longer asks permission to exist. Her presence shifts atmospheres. Men feel it and call it mystery. Women feel it and call it strength. The world feels it and calls it dangerous, but it is not danger, it is wholeness. Wholeness unsettles those who thrive on control. You, listening now, how long have you traded the diamonds of your soul for crumbs of attention? How many times have you whispered your worth in rooms too deaf to hear? Jung told us, what we do not own within ourselves, we will chase in others. If you do not own your strength, you will worship strong men. If you do not embrace your worth, you will starve for validation that crumbles. But when she gathers her shadows, when she holds both tenderness and fire in equal measure, something shifts forever. She stops waiting. She stops begging. She stops bleeding for those who cannot carry her depth, and in that moment the whisper becomes thunder. She does not explain, she does not shrink, she does not apologize, she embodies. The woman who embodies her worth is not made in comfort, she is forged in fire. She rises not because the world allowed her to, but because the weight of suppression became unbearable. Every betrayal, every dismissal, every time her voice was ignored, these were not her undoing, they were her awakening. Jung understood this transformation as individuation, the soul's demand to become whole, to reconcile the fragments of light and shadow within. But individuation is brutal. It requires a death before the rebirth. The death of illusions, the death of false roles, the death of the small, pleasing self. Only then can she step into her true form. Most women are afraid of this death. They cling to their roles as caretakers, lovers, martyrs. They whisper, "If I am good enough, he will stay." They plead, "If I give more, I will finally be chosen." But the psyche knows better. Deep in the unconscious, the anima refuses to be silenced forever. And when she finally rises, she does not rise politely. She rises with storms in her veins. She learns that boundaries are not walls of cruelty, they are temples of respect. She understands that love given without self-respect is not love at all, but self-erasure. She realizes that silence, once her prison, can also be her power. She no longer explains herself to those who mock her truth. She no longer begs for the hands that let her go. To embody worth is to walk through life as if nothing external can shake the core. The Stoics knew this. Seneca warned that no external insult can wound a soul that has claimed its dignity. Marcus Aurelius declared, "Your power lies in your thoughts." The empowered woman lives this. She no longer bends her identity to fit into the fragile egos of others. She no longer performs sweetness while suffocating. She exists unapologetically, and this existence, this unapologetic being, unsettles those who once relied on her silence. They call her arrogant, they call her selfish, they call her cold. But these are projections, mirrors of their own fears. In truth, she is none of those things. She is whole, and wholeness threatens a world built on fragments. Ask yourself, how many times have you swallowed your truth, fearing rejection? How many times have you dimmed your light so others could shine? How often have you begged for scraps when you were always the feast? This is not humility, it is self-abandonment, and self-abandonment is the greatest betrayal of all. The woman who embodies her worth no longer betrays herself. She carries both softness and fire, both nurture and fury. She is not afraid to love, but she is also not afraid to walk away. She is not afraid to give, but she will not bleed to feed another's emptiness. She is not afraid to stand alone, for she knows she is never truly alone. Her soul, her shadow, her strength are with her. And when she steps into the world with this truth, she becomes magnetic. Not in the shallow sense of beauty or charm, but in the primal sense of presence. She draws respect without demanding it. She inspires awe without performing. She no longer whispers her worth in trembling tones. She speaks it in silence, in action, in being. She embodies. There is something terrifying about a woman who finally chooses herself. The world has always known how to handle the woman who pleads, who bends, who sacrifices. She is predictable, manageable, safe. But the woman who embodies her worth is none of these things. She has entered the underworld of her psyche, wrestled with her shadows, and returned with fire in her eyes. She no longer negotiates her value. It is beyond price. Jung taught that the shadow, when repressed, rules us from the dark. But when integrated, it becomes the source of power. For centuries, women have been told to bury their anger, to silence their desires, to mask their intelligence. Yet the shadow does not disappear. It waits. It waits until the body aches with what the soul has denied. It waits until she can no longer endure the hollowness of being half alive. And then, when she is ready, the shadow demands to be seen. This confrontation is not gentle. It is brutal. It is nights of tears that feel like drowning. It is the sharp loneliness of realizing how many masks she has worn. It is the rage that erupts when she finally names the injustices she has endured. And yet, it is here, in this storm, that she begins to rebuild. Because only when she owns her darkness can she wield her light without fear. She no longer asks, "Am I enough?" The question itself dies. She knows she is both too much and never enough, as all human beings are. She knows she cannot be everything for everyone, and she does not want to be. She is whole as she is, complex, flawed, radiant, uncontainable. And this truth makes her magnetic in ways surface charm never could. People feel her before she speaks. They sense the quiet confidence of someone who is no longer starving for approval. Her eyes carry both tenderness and storm. Her voice is calm but unshakable. She does not compete because she has nothing to prove. She does no chase because she does not need to. She attracts, not by effort, but by essence. Think of how many times you have given away pieces of yourself just to be seen. Think of how often you have hidden your true voice, fearing it would scare others away. This is the wound of the feminine, believing that love must be earned through silence, sacrifice, and self-erasure. But true love cannot bloom in the soil of self-betrayal. The woman who embodies her worth understands this. She does not fear solitude because she knows solitude is the temple where the soul grows. She does not fear rejection because rejection no longer defines her. She does not fear being too much because she has realized that anyone who cannot hold her depth was never meant to. She lives by a higher law now. the law of authenticity. And authenticity is not soft, it cuts, it burns, it destroys false bonds and shallow connections. It clears the ground so that real intimacy can take root. And when it does, it is not fragile, it is unshakable because it is built on truth. She no longer whispers, she no longer pleads, she no longer waits. The woman who embodies her worth does not fight for attention, she radiates presence. This is her quiet rebellion. The world expects her to remain small, to barter her essence for affection, to dim her light for fragile egos. But she refuses. Her very being becomes resistance against a system that thrives on her silence. Jung spoke of the anima and animus, the eternal feminine and masculine energies within. For the empowered woman, these forces are no longer fractured. She is not at war with her softness, nor does she deny her fire. She carries both, balanced, fierce, whole, and that wholeness terrifies those who feed on dependency. People will call her difficult, they will call her intimidating, but these words reveal not her nature, but their own fear. The truth is simpler. She is free, free from the invisible chains of approval, free from the endless hunger for validation, free from the lies that once shaped her. You may have felt this hunger yourself, the desperate need to be enough in someone else's eyes, the endless reshaping of your soul to fit into spaces never meant for you. But ask yourself, did it ever work, or did it leave you emptier each time? That emptiness is the whisper of your own worth, begging to be embodied, not bartered. And once embodied, it changes everything. She no longer clings, she no longer bargains, she no longer explains. She moves through the world as if her steps are written in stone, and the stone cannot be erased. To embody worth is to carry silence as a weapon, not silence born of fear, but silence born of power. She no longer argues with those who cannot see her. She no longer defends her boundaries to those committed to crossing them. Her silence says what her lips no longer need to. You do not have access here. This is not cruelty, it is clarity. For too long she poured herself into empty vessels, believing her giving would create love. But now she knows, love without respect is a coffin, and she will not bury herself again. The Stoics understood this. Epictetus declared that we suffer not from events themselves, but from our judgments of them, and so she changes her judgment. Rejection no longer feels like death. Abandonment no longer feels like proof of unworthiness. They are only redirections, proof of her courage to walk away. And here is the paradox. When she no longer needs to be chosen, she becomes magnetic. Her energy draws people, but she does not grasp. She attracts, but she does not chase. She embodies, and the world adjusts around her. Every woman carries wounds from her past, childhood echoes of not being enough, failed loves that left scars, betrayals that shattered trust. For years, these wounds ruled her silently, shaping every choice, every relationship. She mistook them for destiny, but Jung was clear. Until the unconscious is faced, it masquerades as fate, and so she turns inward. She faces the wound, not with shame, but with compassion. She sees the little girl who was silenced, the young woman who begged for love, the heart that gave without measure and was left empty, and instead of running from them, she gathers them into her arms. This is healing, not erasing the past, but weaving it into strength. Her scars are no longer hidden. They are not shame. They are her crown. Every wound stitched into her being whispers, "You survived," and surviving is no longer enough. She is here to thrive. There comes a shift, subtle yet seismic. She realizes she no longer lives in reaction. The empowered woman is not controlled by the moods of others, nor by the approval withheld or given. She has stepped into sovereignty. This sovereignty frightens those who once relied on her obedience. They may call her distant, accuse her of pride, try to shame her back into silence, but the spell is broken. The chain has snapped. She knows the truth. No one can diminish her unless she hands them the power, and she will never hand it over again. This is freedom, the kind that cannot be bought or stolen, the kind that burns illusions and leaves only reality standing. To embody worth is also to embrace solitude. She does not fear the empty room, for in solitude she is not empty, she is full of her own thoughts, her own dreams, her own essence. She does not wait for another to complete her because she is already complete. This is the death of dependency, the death of begging for scraps, the death of apologizing for her depth. From this death comes rebirth. The woman who is not afraid of her own company becomes unstoppable, and so she sits in her solitude not as a prisoner but as a queen in her own kingdom. She rules herself, she governs her soul, and when she walks into the world again, it is not to be rescued, it is to be mirrored, met, matched. The woman who embodies her worth does not chase love, she chooses it. She knows her value is not currency to be exchanged, but a flame to be honored. Anyone who approaches her must come with respect, with depth, with truth. And if they cannot, she walks away, not in bitterness, but in certainty, for she has seen the pattern, how many times love was confused with control, how often giving was mistaken for devotion, how silence was mistaken for peace. No more. Her eyes are awake now, she sees clearly, and clarity is power. The men who once thought they could shape her now stumble in her presence. The friends who once drained her now find her boundaries unbreakable. She does not harden out of hate, she strengthens out of love, love for herself. This is the culmination, the rebirth of a woman who no longer seeks external permission to exist. Her worth is not whispered in fear, it is lived in every breath. She is tender and fierce, wild and wise, shadow and light, whole and unbroken. And here is the secret. In embodying her worth, she does not lose love, she redefines it. She no longer begs for attention, because she knows her soul is enough. She no longer clings to false bonds, because she knows solitude is not emptiness, it is fullness. She no longer hides her scars, because they are proof of her becoming. This is not arrogance, this is not coldness, this is freedom. The freedom of a woman who knows her place is not at the mercy of others, but at the center of her own life.